booktubers, I'm back today to discuss and review this trilogy by Maggie Stiefvater, I don't know, but it's Shiver, Linger, and Forever. And this was in I think my March book haul, and I finally got around to reading it, and it just occurred to me that I don't know the name of this trilogy. I don't know if there is a name for it, if it's the Shiver trilogy. I don't know. If any of you guys know, let me know. But it's crazy. I just realized I didn't know how to introduce this trilogy. Like, today I'm going to be reviewing the blah 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 trilogy, but I don't know. So anyway, first off, I want to talk about the cover design. They are gorgeous, and I mentioned in my book haul before that each book, all the text is in the color of the book cover, like this one's red. And I wanted to review all three of these books in the same video because the books are relatively short and I didn't want to give too much away, so I wouldn't be saying too much. But anyway, to say that these books are about werewolves is a little bit misleading. It's actually more about humans and wolves, and I like it that way. I've never been much of a werewolf lover or vampires or anything like that. Like, I've never given Twilight the chance. I mean, I read Mortal Instruments and that involved werewolves and vampires, but I was in it for the shadow hunters. But I mean, I have nothing against werewolves. It's just that it didn't really strike my interest. I've always been really, really into, like, fallen angels and Nephilim kind of thing. But anyway, like I said, I was really happy to find when I read this book that it was more about human beings shifting into wolves. They didn't have the ability to shift back and forth. It was basically the temperature that decided whether they were human or wolf. For example, in the winter they were always wolves, and then in the spring and summer they would be human. And so it's one or the other. They don't shift like, I think, I know in the Mortal Instruments books, the werewolves, they can shift between werewolf and human whenever they want. They don't get to do that in these books. And the author was really clever in writing her characters this way because I guess she didn't want to give them too much power, too much freedom. I mean, the whole premise of the story is that there are hunters that want to get rid of all the wolves. First of all, I'm going to back up. So it takes place in Mercy Falls, Minnesota, and there have been reports of wolf attacks on people, and there are certain people that are trying to drive the wolves out, but then it's gotten out of hand to the point where they're just trying to kill them, like drop bombs and destroy them. So if these wolves were able to shift back to their human form and go into hiding, that would solve all their problems. So obviously the plot had to be a little more dense than that. Another thing that I really appreciated about these books is that the narrator switches from different characters' points of view. First book, Shiver, the points of view switch between Grace and Sam, and it would say at the beginning of each chapter who is telling the story. And for example, this is Sam. I don't know if you can see, but there you go. And it also has a temperature because, like I said, the temperature has a lot to do with their shifting. So I really like that you can also kind of see the story from a male perspective. Usually with young adult fantasy novels, it's usually told through the protagonist, who is usually the female. So it's nice to see it from a male's perspective. And then in the second... What's going on with my lighting? Second and third book, the narration switches between other characters. Isabel comes into the story, Cole. Three books, they take place over a pretty short span of time, and there's constantly a struggle for Sam and Grace. So they want to be together, but they can't at first because Sam is running out of time. It's his last year. Basically how the shifting works is that every year they get half the year, the cold seasons as wolves, and then the warmer seasons as their human form. but every year that time spent as a human is shorter and shorter until finally they no longer shift and they become wolves forever. And Grace was bitten by wolves, but she never shifted. I'm not going to say why. So Sam was at his last year, and he's running out of time, and he had just finally got to know Grace, and he didn't want to let go of that. This isn't just some kind of love story, which at first I was hesitant to get into it. That's why it took me months after purchasing it to actually read the books, because I didn't want to read just another love story. But it's so much more than that, especially in the second and third books when they bring in other characters. And it becomes so much more than just Sam and Grace trying to make the relationship work. It's about rescuing the pack. So even in the last book, I finished it this morning, and I was reading the notes from the author, and she said that she wanted to keep her wolves acting like wolves, keeping them to their natural behavior, instead of like the typical werewolf, I suppose. And a lot of these characters and the story of the wolves being driven out, that's based on some real events. So I went into these books expecting very little because, like I said before, some of my favorite booktubers did not like these books. They just couldn't get into it, and I really wanted to like it. And I mean, who wouldn't? You wouldn't go into a book hoping not to like it, but I definitely went into it with low expectations. So it's safe to say that these books exceeded my expectations. I really, really enjoyed it. Overall, I would say I would give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Just because it didn't blow me out of the water, but it was so much better than I thought, because they weren't just your typical werewolves shifting back and forth, and they didn't have superpowers or anything like that. They were just wolves when they were wolves, and they couldn't think like humans when they were wolves. So it was great. I can't think, but I thought the first book started out pretty strongly, and then in the second book, it kind of like got a little bit slow for me, but then, what is going on with my lighting? And then in the third book, it was so good. Especially toward the middle and all the way to the end, it was full of excitement, and I was sad that it was over, honestly, but I wanted to get this video up as soon as I could before I started forgetting things or everything starts to jumble together. But, you know, the characters are just so well written, and this is the first young adult book where the male protagonist is not some sexy, gorgeous, perfect guy. I mean, they do have a character like that, but it's not Sam. You know, they describe Sam as tall, gangly, sleepy-eyed looking John Lennon kind of person, but at the same time, he didn't have to be gorgeous and super hot to, you know, win Grace's love and affection. So that was definitely interesting. That's the first. This book was contained many firsts for me. So if you haven't read it, I do recommend it. And also, if you have read it, let me know what you think, because I have never come across a book where it was so, I guess everyone's opinions are so split. Either people really, really loved it, or they just couldn't even finish it. So let me know your thoughts on it. And my next book, I will be reading Sweet Peril. I got this in my June book haul, and I thought I would read it before I left for New Zealand, and I didn't because I fell behind on packing. And so yeah, that'll be my next book. I'm really excited. So I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!